We just heard from Matt Peterson about, kind of the incredible goals we have in California for decarbonization, net zero. And so the question is, how to do this. And we are really very fortunate today to kind of be talking about in details, how do you do this, especially in, challenging, industries. So, we also have had very recently 2 pieces of legislations that we found really exciting that will help us, figure out where we are in terms of decarbonization. These are SB 261 and SB 253, which are requiring firms to provide information about their kind of carbon footprints in scope 1, 2, and 3, and not just for companies that are publicly traded, but companies that are doing business in California. And so that's kind of interesting. And we wanted to know at the Center for Impact, basically, where are we in terms of the state of corporate sustainability? So we just issued, actually yesterday, so that's brand new, a new report of the state of corporate sustainability disclosure. And I just want to share very briefly, kind of 2 elements that we published. And this is, published by the Center for Impact. And so basically, what we see in terms of disclosure is that firms actually, it's S&P 500. So it's kind of the biggest, the most successful firms. They are disclosing a lot of information on scope 1, the direct emissions, scope 2, the emissions, from their electricity usage, but very much less in scope 3. And that's the challenge. What is scope 3? All the supply chain kind of carbon emissions. How do we reduce them? And that's something we're going to, talk about. And especially they are, in terms of where the kind of carbon emissions are by sector. We see, of course, utilities, energy, material. And so today it's really about that, about the kind of the material, the energy. And we have, 2 representatives of these industries, the Long Beach terminal and, kind of Niagara, plastic bottling. So my question to both of you is, first, maybe we start with Bonnie. You are in very, important kind of sectors in the industry, and you have had, long experience in many. We heard your bio. You've worked, in education. You worked in, kind of, policy and other areas. And so, what do you do today? What is your kind of day-to-day job? What is your challenge? What do you find exciting about what you do today? So maybe, Bonnie, just start.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, and I find everything exciting about the work I do.
It's good not to be,
and I have always. I've been doing it for more than 40 years, and I did my first 20 years of my career were really in infrastructure, and like Matt, I actually. Started because of a nuclear power plant leak. I went to Penn State during 3 Mile Island. And so that was my wake-up call. I was like studying political science and in a dispute resolution course. I thought I was going to be a lawyer. And then suddenly this thing happens and I go, oh my gosh, like what do we do? How did we get here? Why are we here? And I'm marching in Harrisburg and I'm marching in DC and I'm, trying to have an impact. And at some point I recognized that I needed to be a mediating force and not like take one side or the other. That, it was a moment in time where I saw this woman screaming at the power plant operator saying like, how could you do this? How could this happen? And he looked at her and said, I'm afraid too. I was there that day and my family lives closer than yours. And it was a real aha moment for me where I thought, we've got a challenge in front of us. And that challenge has only grown. We, as again, Matt said, we live on a finite planet and we're living as if it's infinite. And that's just not the case. And so I've spent 20 years in infrastructure and then went to the private sector where I thought, well, they've got all the money. They can make the change fast. They can make all the decisions. And now I'm sort of back at the crossroads. I'm actually really in between the public and the private sector, very much so. I understand a lot of what's going on in the port and a lot of our big challenges. And it's fascinating to me. And I would only say that personally, I moved from Manhattan Beach to Redondo when I started working at Mattel, from Manhattan to Redondo to Pedro. We call it Pedro, San Pedro. And I built this cute little house with a light gray bamboo deck. And, the first week after living there, I walked out and there was this light layer of black dust, soot. And I was like, what have I done? And where am I living? And why is this happening? And that's what motivated me.
So, kind of what do you do, though, now in this
day to day? Well, I think we'll get a lot into this as in your remaining questions. But day to day, I am the director of sustainability at really the largest, most productive, greenest terminal, quite frankly, in the world, right here in Long Beach. It is fully automated. It is very different from any other terminal you will see in the United States. The only other place you see these terminals are Rotterdam, Hamburg, and in Asia. And so it has taken a lot to get there. And my job is to get to true net zero. So by 2030, I've got to change over the remaining 270 assets to electric.
Okay, so that's the challenge, a big one. John, what is your challenge? What excites you about your role?
Thank you for having me. I guess the biggest challenge is while we're a bottling company, we're actually a manufacturing company. We have over 50 plants in North America, and we've been building 3 plants a year for the last 15 years. So how to keep up with that growth and enable decarbonization, also to work at all of our resources and taking a systems approach to thinking, how do we address water? How do we address plastic? And how do we address carbon? And they're all embedded in one another. Everything has a water footprint. Unfortunately, everything has a plastic footprint now, and everything has a carbon footprint. So how do I work within the company that's on a continual growth spurt to deal with decarbonization and pull it together as a systems approach instead of dealing with one issue at a time?
Out of curiosity, how many bottles do you produce per day or year?
We don't let that information out. Let's just say...
How many tons of plastic then?
Same thing. I can tell you in California because it's public, right? But a plant, we can make 3 million bottles an hour on a line, and we have around 150 lines.
Okay. And 8 hours a day?
No.
24. So we get there. So that's an enormous challenge. So both of you have an enormous challenge. So now, how do you address this challenge, Bonnie?
I think that how do we address this challenge? I do think it is a step at a time, a day at a time that you often, like, I think about this with Scope 3. A lot of people are talking about supply chain, Scope 3. I've been in that since 1997 when I joined Hewlett-Packard. And it's, originally I look and I thought, we have 200, we had 100,000 suppliers. Then we bought EDS and Compaq and we had 270,000 suppliers. And everybody said, this is impossible. You can't do this. And I was like, well, let's do an 80-20. Who represents the majority of our volume? Where are the most vulnerable? How do we take this on a day at a time? And that's what we do as well at the port. It was like I got there and I said, okay, how many assets do we have that are still fossil fuel, that are either propane, diesel, gas, or natural gas? And how much electricity are we using and how clean is that electricity? So that's my scope 2. So my scope 1 was, let's take on the fuel consumption of what we're currently doing that's fossil fuel based, and let's transition that over. We are very fortunate in that we made an agreement and built a 66 kV dedicated substation. So we can fully electrify, and we will do that. The second, Scope 2, is a bit more of a challenge because SCE is only 43% clean today. Natural gas is the majority of their transmission. So I have to make up for what they do. And we're going to talk, I think, a little bit about credits. And that's, I'm very active in LCFS, renewable energy credits, offsets, insets, all of those things. And then Scope 3 is, okay, the first thing I did when I got there is I went to the truck guy and I said, how many trucking entities do we deal with? And he said 2,500. And I said, okay, but how do you measure those transactions? And he said, the number of transactions a year. I said, okay, what is the maximum? And he said, well, it's this, over 1,000 transactions a year, which means they're there 3 times, a day type of thing. And I said, okay, so how many are there? 9. I said, oh, okay. How many have more than 500 transactions? 45. How many have more than 300 transactions? 40. So I was like, so less than 100 that I need to convince to electrify. So how do I incentivize that? So you just take it one step at a time and dig in.
So I understand in terms of your footprint on 1 and 2. So what's the main source of carbon?
So again, remember that we just spent $2.5 billion to decarbonize. So we were fully diesel utility. In 2015, we were totally diesel. Today, we have reduced already by 90% by totally automating, electrifying 93 cranes. So we are one of those true success stories that you can do this. It does take money. It takes political will. It was a 10-year environmental document. It was a lot of stakeholders, a lot of fights. And here we are. And now we've got the additional 10%. So it's changing over those 270. It's an infrastructure challenge because you have to dig back into the ground, put the switchgear boxes, put the conduits, make sure the chargers go with the equipment, make sure the equipment is technology ready, make sure the longshoremen want to drive it, that they're not going to red tag it because, they feel it's unsafe. So all of those things are a change management process.
And they cost money. So we'll talk about this.
And they cost money. Yeah, $250 million is what is in my current plan.
Yeah. So John, to you now. So how do you decarbonize?
So we're a manufacturer. So our largest scope, though, is scope 3. But we're unique because we're also some of the largest retailers in the world. We're their scope 3 as well. Okay. And we may be their largest footprint in a particular category. So traditionally, of our scope 1 and 2, electricity was over 90%, right, because of the manufacturing. The raw materials coming in, which is primarily plastic, is almost 60% of our total emissions, right? And we've done a whole lot. So we make bottled water, bottled beverage, and I said we make billions of them. We've reduced the weight of the bottle by over 50% the last 15 years. So we decarbonize that. Same thing with the closure, the cap that goes on it, we've been able to reduce that weight. The packaging that goes around it, we've been able to get rid of all of paper, nest it. So we've been able to reduce the weight of the plastic to the bare minimum. And then you put it on a pallet and wrapping that up, we've been able to reduce that. So we can get more pallets on a truck, so fewer trucks moving. And because we expanded to the 50 plants, the length of haul has gone down by 69% over the last 15 years. And so now we have fewer miles to travel to get that product there.
So interesting. So like main strategy, it's basically efficiency, right? Efficiency of your production process. Are there like savings from this?
Huge savings, financial savings. And that's what's driven that. We use recycled content, which also drives down the carbon. And then electrification. We have over 1,000 electric autonomous, what they call laser-guided vehicles, the forklifts.
Is there like any technology in terms of change, from plastic to something else that you're looking into?
So from a carbon footprint, PET bottles for water is by far the best. Whether it's a bio-based material, whether it's a fiber-based material, whether it's a aluminum can or glass. But when you look at the total life cycle, not just carbon, but eutrophication, fossil fuel use, things like that, PET bottle, because we can lightweight and get these efficiencies across all aspects of primary, secondary, tertiary packaging, it has the lowest footprint. Okay. And so it's also the least expensive and hence the most accessible. All right. Our mission is to make hydration healthy, and it's to allow people when they want it, and most importantly, when they need it, to have access to it. And so,
but are you looking into, like we would talk about Lacey and, kind of entrepreneurs who have some, brilliant ideas about a new product? Do you see anything exciting in this area?
So we've looked at carbon capture into plastic. Unfortunately, the way it works now, it interferes with the recycling system. Okay. So we're PET is the most recycled plastic in the world, And again, that reduces the carbon. We're looking at how we can reduce the manufacturing of recycled PET to reduce the carbon, and how we can get recycled material in other aspects.
Okay.
And then eventually carbon capture, if we can make it work with the existing recycling system.
Okay, so it sounds like a good plan. And it's interesting to see the efficiency gains that you have. So going back to, I think Bonnie did have a different perspective on that in terms of the cost of changing the infrastructure. And so we talked about the Inflation Reduction Act as a very, incredible push for these types of infrastructure change. So can you tell us about how much money you're able to get and what you're hoping, and some of the challenges maybe of getting this money?
Yeah, I think the money is a really important conversation. As I mentioned, we spent $2.5 billion. It was the company that was there prior to me, OOCL, that was Oriental Overseas Container Lines, that put in about $1 billion to make this change, and then the port another $1.5 billion. The port is the landowner, right? So that was what was invested. We have another $250 million to spend to make this final push to be a true net zero by 2030. We will get there by 2030. We have actually become 5 times more productive. So we went from 700,000 TEU to 3.3 million TEU. So think about that. We grew 5 times the size in 5 years. So it's a huge growth spurt. And that's really a statement about how not only can the environment and the economy survive, they can thrive together if you do it right. This last $250 million, it started as $200 million. Maggie has my report, and for a few people I've brought a few extra reports, but please do go on our website, download our first year and second year report. We're going to be extremely transparent about exactly what we're doing, exactly what's problematic and what are our challenges. And one of our first challenges was that immediately the prices of the conduits and the switchgear boxes and the chargers and the equipment went up by 30% in 1 year. 30%. So my 200 went to 250 million. And I saw the opportunity with the infrastructure, not just the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, which actually hasn't come out for clean ports yet. We're waiting right now, and we're going to be submitting for about $100 million on that. We've already submitted to the Infrastructure Reduction Act, the PIDP, and we got $37 million from that, of which we pay 20%. And we submitted on the CalSTA, California State Transportation Agency, and we got $45 million on that, of which we'll spend they'll give us $36 million. And we got another $1 million from CARB and AQMD and a few others. So we've already raised $68 million of the $250 million. And that is what I'm immersed in right now when you ask about my day-to-day, because there is this tremendous push right now before the elections to make decisions and subscribe that money.
Make decision before it's too late. It's
So I'm literally submitting on IRA, PIDP, climate pollution reduction grants, raise. I'm submitting like $300 million in the next 2 months request to try and get to that 200 that I need.
Well, so we have this, great kind of, infrastructure, in California to help, businesses get some of these grants and so on. But at the same time, and that's a question for John, at the same time, we have this SB 253 and 261 that are going to require companies that are, kind of operating in California above, and revenues about 501 billion, depending on which of these two, to kind of provide the information about carbon footprint and to provide, also the kind of the strategic plan on how you do this decarbonization. So how are you ready? How, it's a change for you. You were not expecting that from,
No, it's a big change. And we're a privately held single ownership company. So we're avoided much reporting. We're ready. That's something I've been doing for years. I did it at UCR before on greenhouse gas reporting. We have very detailed emissions through Scope 3, right? We know exactly, we make our own bottles, we make our own closures. So we know exactly where everything's coming in. We know for each plant what the emission factors are at those plants. Because these are global emissions. You're selling California, but you have to report on your global footprint. And so we have operations in the UK and Australia as well. All this has to come together. It will be interesting. Again, our challenge is growth. We continue to grow. And as we grow, we also move into locations where the grid's much dirtier. And there's fewer incentives, or the price of electricity is so low that to get renewable, at the end of this year, we'll have 80 megawatts renewable energy installed, either on offsite winds that we own or on-site solar. So it'll be a challenge. There's a big call for science-based target initiatives for companies to join, and many of the companies that we make bottles for have those, and we're part, again, their Scope 3, so we're having to do things to enable them to meet their targets as well.
So I mean, so that's a challenge for your work, and Bonnie, I think there's been or you've already been, you have your report, and we should all kind of look at it and doing that for it's a different type of company also. So of course we're here at UCLA with lots of students who are excited about entering this space. Any kind of suggestions about your need, what you think the needs are in the industry for, MBA students who are interested in sustainability or, kind of renewable energy, clean tech. What do you think? And you do have the jobs open.
There are actually a lot of jobs at the port and with the port and with, the unions are a different discussion. You have to approach them, but for sure we have all kinds of job training centers and things like that. And I will say, I teach sustainable supply chain here at UCLA, and it's all about traceability, transparency. I'm incredibly dedicated to that. And from the first mile of the supply chain to the last, like Matt, I've been to the Congo many times when I was with HP, and we have a lot of work to do because nobody realizes how much slavery, labor exploitation, and degradation is occurring from the first mile through the last mile. So please, wake up to all those details of everything you're wearing, all your electronics, everything you're driving, everything you're sitting on, your furniture you're building with. It's all coming from modern day slavery and tremendous degradation, particularly of the Southern Hemisphere. So just really waking up to that fact and getting educated about it so that you can be active as a participant in society with companies, with governments. Be part of civil society. Be part of the government. We need people in the government. I would say that 21st century skills have been talked about for a lot, but they're really critical here because the technology is changing very quickly. AI, we've had it around for 20 years, AI, but it's integrating into everything now, and robotics and gaming and blockchain. And, all these technologies are critical. AR, VR, using them all are really necessary. So, but the critical skills are the change management, the negotiations, the communications, the conflict resolution. Change hurts the brain, and people will generally resist. And so your ability to listen and empathize with people, like Matt said, Therrell down in East Yards, who says, look, are we talking about my friend who was in a funeral yesterday or your ship? What are we talking about here? So being able to listen to that, empathize with that, be present for it, and really having multiple lenses with which you look through. If you can I'd suggest work for the government, work for a small consultancy, a large consultancy, an NGO, a private company. Do it all, because then you look through all those different lenses and it helps you be apathetic.
Thank you. John, do you have jobs?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do jobs. So communication's key, right, to be able to open it. Resilience, for our planet is important, but also if you're in sustainability in corporations, you have to be resilient. You have to have grit to stick it out.
Patience.
Patience, I don't have a lot of patience. And my company knows that, right? And they're trying to catch up, and I keep it that way. so they have to catch up. But no, if you know what you're getting into, I know exactly why I work for the company I work for. I love working for that company, but I'm there to change them and to move our product into something that's truly sustainable, and I believe it can be. And so you've got to have that resilience and dedication to stick with your beliefs, because not all corporations are looking towards a sustainable future. They're looking for next quarter or next year or whatever. And so you just have to communicate and use a systems thinking approach. You got to get people thinking in systems.
Well, thank you very much to all the change agents who are here. We're all change agents. We need all to kind of work toward these kind of new goals that we have, or, old goals that have always been there. And thank you very much for, kind of talking to us about what you're doing. And we're looking forward to reading, some of the results and getting you back, for more discussions. Thank you very much.